What does it take to stay ahead in B2B SaaS? Winning in the margins. Welcome to the new Go-to-Market Playbook. I'm your host, James Kaikis, Chief Revenue and Experience Officer at Testbox. In our interview series, I sit down with go-to-market operators, leaders, and industry experts who are defining the next era of go-to-market by winning in the margins. These leaders are focused on incremental innovations and non-obvious advantages that drive big results. The goal of this interview series is for you to take action in your business, so sit back, grab a notepad, and enjoy the episode. Josh, great to see you, man.
Oh, James, good to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. So for most people who don't know, we've known each other for quite some time through Presales Collective.
Yep.
And I brought this up to you earlier this year. When I first started at Testbox, I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. I want to have you on. And unfortunately, it's taken me a little bit longer than I had planned on it, but I'm just glad this is happening.
Same, and thanks for having me on. We talked about this at an event, and we're like, hey, what do you think? Can we just get together, just shoot back and forth, see what's going on? And I was like, yeah, it sounds great. And so I'm glad we can finally make it happen.
Me too. I think some of the best things about this series right now is, you and I have talked throughout the years about these topics, and now just talking about it on camera, right? And being able to record it, have an interview, and let folks listen to take actionable takeaways to be like, oh, this is what I need to do in my business. So
putting it down for everyone to see.
Yeah.
And see how it goes.
I think before we get there, though, we have to comment on the attire, man. So for those who don't know, you are the most fashionable, I don't even want to just say solutions executive, because it probably goes beyond that. But I texted you before here. I was like, what shoes are you wearing? What watch are you wearing? How are we coordinating?
I think that's fair. We did coordinate. We talked about shoes. We talked about watches. We got matching watches today. Swatch. We both prefer plastic right now. I think it's just where everything's going. And we both went with Nikes. We went with the girl dads, which I can appreciate. Little Travis Scott's for me.
I love it.
It's either way, our wardrobes, I think, are a little matchy-matchy today, actually.
We're pretty matchy-matchy. You've got a little more flavor in there than I do. But
a little flair underneath, but it was I was trying to, be aware of color patterns and things like that. I read all my notes.
I love it. So, Josh, why don't you give a little introduction to yourself? Who are you? What's your role, responsibilities, and really, how did you get to your current job?
Yeah, so I run SE's Solution Engineering at Procore, Global Vice President, and that includes what we call our standard core SE organization. We have a couple of other groups as well in there. One is we have our acceleration group. And so that is a lot of your standard business value, our proposals teams, what some people would call an overlay or specialists. Those groups are in there as well as our proposals teams. And so all the groups that you might imagine and some you might not.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to balance that. We have also a small but growing group that's around tools. So we call that sales productivity.
Yeah.
In the world that I came from, which was Salesforce before Procore, that would be considered Q-branch.
Got it.
Not quite to the size that we were at. And so that obviously means that before Procore, I was at Salesforce.
Yeah.
I did an 18-year tour at Salesforce.
18 years, wow.
And I'm on year 5 now at Procore. So
amazing.
Serial monogamist when it comes to companies.
That's pretty incredible. 18 years at Salesforce, you've seen a lot of iterations. I'm curious. Let's actually talk about go-to-market and software generally.
Yeah.
What did you see change over those 18 years at Salesforce? Or was there a specific something that stands out to you?
There was a lot of moments over 18 years.
I believe
it's hard
that.
to recall. So sometimes it can be, I don't know, an event that you went to. You're like, oh, I recalled the best parts or the parts that I wanted to remember. Yeah. But one of them was actually when I was doing enablement, and I was doing enablement for SEs. And it got to this moment where we had gotten so far on what was Sales Cloud at that time, that one product, right, that really got you to where you were.
Right.
And all of a sudden we couldn't do that anymore. And everyone knew that. But comp plans and the way things were, it was just a lot easier to sell that, especially when you talk about CRM, because that's what salespeople use and do. So it was just so innate.
Sure.
Whereas selling something like service or a platform, not only was it new, it was hard.
Yeah.
So go with what you know.
Yeah.
And I see that cycle happen at a lot of places. It happened at Procore. It happens at so many different companies where the product that got you there is not the one that's going to get you to where you need to be.
Sure.
So it was those moments of how do we enable people to talk about a platform? And I think the way that shifted is SEs had to become much wider, right? And so they had to go much wider on all their product sets and not quite as deep. And that involved things like bringing in specialists, people who were deep, and then who were those folks? Were they the most experienced? Were they the folks you hired from the outside? And that kind of evolved. And then how do you sell to that? Is it your existing sales team? Do you need new salespeople? So it really broke into a bunch of things, but the team itself, they continued to evolve. So you had this idea of folks that were really good at getting deep in discovery. That was more the generalists. And then folks that really wanted to go super deep on a product. And those were your specialists.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things I want to dig into that.
Yeah.
But I love that answer, and I appreciate that. And it's got me thinking, because we're talking, with executives like yourselves about like the, changes that are happening in go-to-market. And one of the things that has come up in a couple of conversations is just the general tech bloat that has existed over the last decade, right? Like software has just exploded. There's so many companies out there, and there's so many companies that are just point solutions. And I feel like, in this market where, do more with less, David from Gartner called it do less with less.
Yeah.
Companies need to figure out, how do they become a platform? How do they become that more than just a point solution?
Yep.
And I think that goes with an evolution in thinking, not just from product, but go-to-market motions, which brings us to today.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, how Salesforce navigated that shift, beyond just the specialists and, building those other teams that allowed the acceleration? Is there something that stood out to you that you emulated at Procore and you think more companies need to emulate now?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, early Salesforce days, it was around this idea of academies, right? It was enablement.
Yeah.
You really needed to actually teach people. So you couldn't fault folks for not doing it because they didn't know. They weren't taught. And so in some cases, this idea of like moving to a broader approach, if it's not working, you got to wonder, like, where's the fault at? Like, have these folks been taught? Now, in a lot of cases, software has evolved. SaaS has been around for 20 years, right?
Yeah,
and so
I
think a lot of people have understood that motion better. So you have reps that come that have done this in the past, SEs that have come that have done this in the past. So it's gotten better. I think when I fast forward to Procore, it's this idea of, hey, we were originally doing a lot of point and click demonstration because there weren't as many offerings out there, right? There was a couple big competitors, but in a lot of cases, easy to use, right? It was still like, that was what's going to hammer it home. And that becomes less and less. Competitors catch up. Everyone becomes easy to use. So then you get attacked by the top, right? Big competitors, and the bottom, to your point, of point solutions.
Yeah.
So then you have to think about what are the types of demonstrations that you want to do. And we categorize those into three types of things. One is the dreaded RFP demo. Credit Todd Jansen with that one. But that is like the bullet point list of things to go shut up and show, right? Shut up and show me the demo.
Yeah.
And every SE that's watching this right now knows that that is the one that we like the least.
Absolutely.
But in some cases, that's what you get. So we have to be aware that is part of it. And there's actually a lot of solutions out there today helping take it away from us.
Absolutely.
Which I love, and you can probably speak to that more than anybody. The second is the process-based demo. So we've gotten up the stack a little bit. We've understood enough to take out like an entire workflow or an entire set of what one person's job might look like, and we can show that. And the third is the persona-based demonstration. And that's where you've really unlocked almost that C-level or close to, what the economic buyer's real challenge is. And you can actually show them current state, dystopian, gray, and then future state, right? Sunshine and rainbows version of what it looks like with, in a best case, your solution, maybe partners, right? Or maybe some other set of technology that actually helps and makes yours even that much stronger.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that I learned at Salesforce the most was being able to tell that compelling story.
Right.
And the approach that Salesforce takes and ingrains in you. And then once you leave Salesforce, you go and do that same motion and story at your own organization.
And I think that's proliferating across a lot of other companies now. I think whether Salesforce started it or it happened in a lot of cases at the same time, I think a lot more people are starting to see the power of that. And it's hard because it's experiential. Right?
Yeah.
If you've never done one, you're like, I don't know. It just kind of seems like dark art over there. And part of my journey at Salesforce is we had an innovation function, and what we learned early on was you really had to bring people into the process in order for everyone to understand.
Great point.
Okay, I get it. Because otherwise, it just feels like that just seems like something somebody else should do. But I'm going to go back to what's comfortable.
Yeah. This is really interesting, and you bring up the word comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I think when I reflect back on my solutions career, I feel like I've been told that there's this this is the way of doing things. And I think I have not enjoyed that so much, right? I think that the solutions professional is capable of so much more.
Yeah.
And so, you obviously spent 18 years at Salesforce. You've been at Procore 5 years. You're well known in this profession. You're at the top of the game there. Is there something that has stood out to you in terms of the evolution of the solutions engineering role?
So it's interesting. I think Salesforce was so big by the time that I left, and big is relative, right? It's still medium and small to like companies like Coke or something like that. But when I was able to go to Procore, there was just a smaller set of folks where you're able to have more of an outsized impact, potentially, especially on process.
Yeah.
And not just in like the land of solutions, but in others as well. And so some of the things that we had started at Salesforce, I was able to actually meet the team first where they're at and figure out what it would look like there. So one example, and this is this kind of common thing that you'll get is you'll go to a sales leader and be like, how do you understand what's going on with the deal? And I just call the SE, right?
Yeah. Incredible, right?
It makes you feel good, right? But that also does not scale.
It doesn't.
In any way, shape, or form. And so what we tried to do was operate under this idea of how can we at scale give back a correct answer, or at least what our answer was, how we're feeling about the deal, to the sales team, to the organization, the CEO, to the CRO, to whoever it was. We had done something like to Salesforce, but credit to Kyle Pennington, who's on our team now. He really wanted to drive this idea of a deal score, the way that Procore does it.
Wow.
And the way that our SEs would really be able to digest it. And we needed a little bit of encouragement along the way.
Yeah.
But the simple answer was we created a stoplight of red, yellow, and green of how we felt about the deal. And then we gave folks some parameters of like how you would actually think about that. This may surprise you, but not all the sales leaders were on board right away.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
So you may understand the reasoning, right? It may seem obvious, but they thought that we were trying to own the forecast.
Right.
And the reality is we were a confidence lever.
That's amazing.
Choose to use it or not.
Sure.
But there was a great story, and if he's still around, I'd love to give him some help for it. But he was saying like, hey, why don't you own like the technical win and we'll take the rest. And I think I asked on the call, I was like, are you trying to tell me to stay in my lane?
Ooh, I love that.
And we had a good banter. So it was done in jest. I'm not puffing my chest in any way, shape, or form. Like, we were good friends. And he's like, no. But his perception was we were trying to take over. The reality was we were just trying to help.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a way where he could just say, like, pick up the phone and call the SE.
Yeah.
Now they could do it at scale.
That's amazing.
And the way we were able to take that further was we got our CRO at the time on that message of legal, technical, political, commercial, and what's the deal score? Right?
That's good.
And so that was great.
Yeah.
Now, the downside of that is like as SEs, we were worried in some cases about would that reflect poorly on an AE?
Yes.
Right? And the message has to be it's not about the AE at all.
It's not.
Prosecute the deal and how you think about that and that alone. And don't get caught up in the rest. And let's just see where it goes. And so the one thing you had to be careful of is yellow. Yellow is right in the middle. Yellow is Death Valley. And that's what we found a lot. And so we just have a big push towards the end of a month or a quarter to move either onto red or onto green with clear parameters on like what that means. So they have a way to dig in their heels.
I love this topic, right? Like I think you are the most well-versed solutions professional when it comes to forecasting, right? And playing a role. And I really appreciate that you talked about how you got sales buy-in in that situation. But a lot of times when I've talked about this topic, I'm getting pushback from the solutions team. So how did you handle that to be like, hey, we're going to play a role in forecasting and here's why it matters?
Yeah. Some of it was literally they hadn't been apart. So it was like, I don't know what I'm missing.
Sure.
In some cases, this was a way for them to give their voice. And the amount of times I've heard people say like, we just need a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And
absolutely.
And in some cases, people were pushing back against this. I was like, no. This is what like everybody's trying to get to.
This is a good thing.
Yeah, this is what everybody wants. So like if other groups could hear you say that, they would switch places in an instant. But what it did is it not only gave like me a spot inside of the forecast, but all the managers.
Yeah.
Because
huge.
I can't own and be responsible or memorize all of those. So now they came on. And in a lot of cases, they were able to articulate what was going on. And then all of a sudden, few managers started taking it a little bit further.
Yeah.
So we'd get to an end of a quarter, right? And let's say you want to start thinking about what else could we pull into the quarter. Now they're starting to look at deals that are outside of the quarter, but marked deal score green.
Yeah.
Because when it's green, you win.
Right.
The other side of it is that they're looking at in the quarter marked as red. So because we do win red deals, but like we lose a lot too.
Sure.
So now if we can take a look at what are the deals that we're probably going to lose or might lose or push, and which are the ones that we think we have a good shot of winning, it was just another way to actually work in partnership with sales, because everyone that says it's easy, like go spend a day in their shoes, like it is tough work being an AE, and it's tough work being a leader too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you just talked about partnership with sales, right?
Yeah.
Because I think too many times solutions professionals don't have enough empathy for the sales leader. You just said this, right?
Yeah.
And as someone who now owns a number, wow, the immense pressure that comes with owning a number, forecasting, and trying to find predictability in the business is insane, right?
Yeah.
And as solutions professionals, we're typically insulated from that. We don't have to see and feel that pain.
Yep.
We don't know what it's like to know that we might lose our job if we don't, predict things accurately. And so I'm really glad that you've given that level of accountability to your team. But going back to that word partnership, how has that changed the partnership between solutions and sales?
I mean, for us, because we show up inside of the forecast, it puts more and more almost pressure on, like, it can't just be a score. Like, we're going to check it. And we think that if it's green, it'll actually funnel into things like our analytics, right? Our predictability models, where, hey, I'm not going to ever compensate an SE on how accurate they are. Because if I ever do that, then it's this idea of, is it green because we're winning or winning because it's green, right? We'll wait, right? We'll wait to know to the very end. So we can't ever do that. So for those watching at home, like, you can't ever compensate on this metric, but it's important for SEs to understand that. Now, the byproduct of that was when our sales leader was out on deals.
Yeah.
Who was left running the forecast?
You were.
I was running the forecast.
I was so excited to talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, that's incredible. You were running the forecast.
Yeah. And it started to become a little more common, but the first time I remember this happened, we were on the call and we're like, we're waiting for the sales leader to jump on. And like, oh no, I got it this week. And I remember there was just like this weird pause. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah. They're like, why you? I was like, why not?
Yeah. I love
let's
that.
go.
I love that.
And I took a lot of what I had learned and I was able to use some of that phraseology, but I had my own spin on it too.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that sales leader wouldn't come back and ask their own questions.
Yeah, of course.
But it was really interesting. And it got people into a different type of motion. So mine was different than sales, and probably a little bit of that off and on, give and take, have an egg, whatever you want to call it, was good for the team, right? Because they were focused on different pieces of what I would ask or what sales leader would ask each time.
That's amazing.
But it was a ton of fun, and that was like a great learning in itself.
I bet.
And like getting comfortable in doing that and being able to free flow a little bit, you find out a sales leader sometimes they think they know where they're going to go. And then all of a sudden they hear something and they're like, nope, I'm going to deviate here because I feel like this may be the problem.
Yeah. I love that you've got that experience. And I wish that more solutions professionals could get that experience, because you just feel a different weight. You start asking different questions and you bring that solutions curious mindset in a different approach to business predictability.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about, though, is as we continue to talk about building the relationship, one of the things that I have always felt like for myself, right, is I've always been a more business savvy solutions engineer, solutions consultant, right?
Yeah.
I can get technical where I need to, but I'm never going to get hands on the keyboard. But that has allowed me to do well in my career in partnering with sales. And I think that it depends on the organization, depends on the product, where you might need someone more technical or more biz savvy. But at the same time, what we've talked about at Presales Collective is the sliding scale of technical. So do you feel like the team owning a portion of forecast has allowed them to become more biz savvy and to be more strategic partners to the sales executives, which at the end of the day de-risks a deal?
I think it is de-risking a deal.
Yeah.
And I think part of where you're going to is I'm actually seeing new hybrid roles in other companies.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to call what the Brangelina version of this is going to be, right? But there's this idea of like an overlay sales team, an overlay SE team. And I think what companies are starting to do now, in a lot of cases, they're like, it's one.
Yeah.
Because it's a super expensive model to
It is.
hire
It's
both.
very expensive.
So Like, is it the SE that starts to become more commercial, right? Like understand the commercials of the deal, or is it the traditional AE that becomes more technical? And like in a lot of cases, products are not getting easier to use.
They're not.
Right? They're getting harder and they're getting more complex, and things like AI brings a whole different level of complexity.
It does.
So people that have a technical background tend to find an easier fit in some of these types of roles. The question is, are they ready to take on the bag?
Right. Which is a big question that
it is.
You got to answer yourself, right?
And then I think the other piece of that is how far down the line, like where does the role and the line blend between like pre and post sale?
Sure.
And those are like two of the big things.
Yeah.
If you allow me a little bit of the rant.
I was going to ask you to dig in a little bit. So let's go.
And I think we have some similar views on
do.
this. Some of this probably will did I say it or did you say it? But like the idea of like SaaS was, it's been around for 20 plus years.
Yep.
Right. And I think when it first started, it was this new motion. And the people who were buying it, regardless of who it was, they needed a lot of help. They needed help with the relationship side, navigating. But now those same folks have implemented 5, 10 sets of software.
Sure.
At least, right? SaaS is 2 decades old.
Yes.
And what they need from the types of people after a deal is sold is more of a consultant.
Sure.
Right? And I think this is where this kind of what is the CSM and the SE. And
yes.
Those two roles, similar to this like technical sales colliding, so is the SE and the CSM role colliding.
Yeah.
And more, what I'm finding with customers and hearing is that they're like, great, but like, how do I do this inside of the product? Like, yeah, I know I get it.
Yeah. Okay. Light bulb rant time for both of us, right? Because if you think about how expensive the model is traditionally, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if we think about how software has happened over the last, decade, 2 decades, like we've talked about, I tend to get rid of pre and post sales, right? I think sales exist forever, right? And it's pre and post signature is what we call internally, but you have to deliver value constantly.
Right.
And you always have to deliver value. And my problem with traditional customer success orgs, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to any people because you talk about functions generally, is that they haven't been enabled or equipped with all of the answers to handle things with the customers in that moment of time. Yeah. And so when they become like, information gatherers and go find the right person to solve, it becomes extremely inefficient. Yeah. And so when you think about, whether it's a customer solution manager, if you keep the CSM, or a solution consultant within those dedicated install base, you need to be able to deliver product value, adoption utilization value, and meet the customer where they are in that moment.
Yes.
Unlike, let me get back to you and it's 1 week, 2 weeks. It's just that lack of sense of urgency in the information passer. I just don't think it has a place in go-to-market moving forward.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's where we are right now. And we have to be careful we don't go down this, bashing route of like sales or CS because like all the functions are needed. But I think what the customer needs right now, right, is this level of we're in this time where technology is getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and they need people to show them actually how to use the product. Yeah. So I don't think that the folks are bad, to your point. I think that the roles are changing now, and like the expectations of the customer is what's causing that.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you what caused that. So expectation of the customer. So talk about that a little bit more. Like what does that actually mean to you, and why is that causing a shift? Yeah,
and part of it is, again, customers are more enabled than they've ever been before. They go to your website. They talk to other customers like you. They know your pricing equal or better than you do in some cases.
Yeah,
and
that's
exactly
crazy. Yeah.
How to pressure point you. We used to joke at Salesforce that we've taught our customers how to buy in the worst ways.
100%.
Right?
Salesforce did a lot of that.
Find the end of quarters, right? And I think they've done a really good job of reversing a lot of that. So kudos. But at the same time, like they have so many expectations, and it doesn't stop, to your point, on signature. It continues through that. So the expectation is you're going to be there not only right then when you're showing it, but that what you've shown is going to carry through. And this puts a different level of like pressure and emphasis on pre-sales.
Yeah.
Because I will say, if you want to throw stones at ourselves, we have been guilty of potentially just showing a few things to get things across the line and chucking it over the fence.
See you later. No accountability.
To our brothers and sisters and CS. And that hasn't been fair either.
It's not fair.
I think, when we hold the mirror up at ourselves, those are some of the things that we have to take a good look at. Like, how far do we push things? And this goes back to customer expectations and saying, hey, look, we can show you what our product is now, or we can blast you to the moon. right?
Great call out.
We want to be a partner, but we also need to understand, like, where are you in this kind of evolution or this journey? Because if you're way over here, we have some ways to look at that.
Yeah.
And if you're way back here, we have some things to look at that. Either way is okay, but we want to make sure that we're giving you the right experience that you need. And so that's kind of how I frame it.
Yeah, I really like the framing, and you're right. When you talked about the AE, SEs, converging, I know a number of solutions engineers that are moving to account executive roles within their business. They're going to have to learn a little bit different function, but they're going to be very dangerous with the product and value and telling customer stories. But when you talk about SC and CSM, very similar type journey, but I've seen some CSMs make that move to solutions consulting, and I've seen some orgs actually, scale down and pare down their CSM model and invest in SC. Now, my thought process, and you've used this word a couple times, is it's all about the enablement. Again, it's no fault of anyone in a function because you've been told this is your job, this is your description, these are the things that you do, these are the things you don't do. But the reality is like that's not always aligned to what the customer wants and what the customer needs. And I think organizations need to take more of an emphasis on enabling their current team because they've got domain knowledge, they've got industry knowledge. Let's turn some of those people, if they want to be part of that journey, and turn them into a more value-oriented resource for the customer.
So what makes this even more tricky is that in a time where everyone's trying to be very smart about every single hire, enablement, right, is looked at in an organization in a lot of cases that is not direct revenue impact. But I look at it as like I will literally give a headcount because I think for every one headcount that I give, 10 or so SEs, I may have that I may feel that level of impact. Because they're getting trained specifically on a certain number of things. And I'm focused on just a core set of elements, which is around like onboarding, soft skills, technical training. Like those three things, if we just do that on a rinse and repeat level, we'll be great. I also think that everything is 1 degree from compensation. So, and I think that that's a fair thing. People do what they're paid to do.
100%.
Right? We become forensic accountants when it comes to our comp plans. It is just truth. And so I think that to the point of how do you get these groups to align, the folks that are traditional pre-sales, they need to have some adoption metrics.
I agree.
And I feel like the folks that are traditional post-sales, they need to have some revenue metrics. And if you incent people to do that, who wins is the customer.
100%.
And that's where we just need to make sure we don't get lost. That's all we're doing this for.
Yeah, I love that. And, I've shared that I think both revenue and customer success are everybody's job. Right? It's part of the company-wide mantra. I think the enablement conversation goes back to, anyone who's just passing information. I've worked with enablement teams that are just information passers, right? And they're not strategic partners because, the sales leader or the ops leader in charge is not viewing them that way and deploying them that way. And more companies need to use that as a strategic resource that is helping gain efficiency within company. I cannot see why that isn't a really prominent path for more solutions professionals. I know a couple of solutions leaders who actually have taken on enablement in the last 6 months. And it's because they're product experts, they're customer story experts, they're value experts.
I don't really care where it lives. But I love for the folks to come out of my organization. I love that to be a path where either they're going to go full time or they're going to be a path where they go there and then come back for a bit as well. The other types of people that I think work really well in there are consultants. Right? Whether you're in IT, whether you come from consulting, because they actually know how to dig through problems and they're used to being in unfamiliar territory. So they can be a little bit of a chameleon and almost act as if for a long enough period where the group accepts them and then they're kind of off to the races.
I like that.
But it gives them a path in.
I like that. I want to come back to one thing that you highlighted, and that is a very important topic, is incentives driving behavior, right? And so, in terms of the traditional pre-sale, post-sale, right? I liked what you mentioned on adoption. I actually talked to an organization who's comping their sales team on go live and launch, and the commission's not paid until after go live and launch. Do you have an opinion on that?
That is putting your money where your mouth is right there.
It is, I was surprised. So
if value and adoption is the new ROI, then I think that that's great. I think it's really tough to make a change like that mid-stroke. I think if you start there, it's a great way to enter. I think it's really tough to try to make that shift unless you are making a ton of other shifts in your go-to-market motion at the same time. That said, I would love for there to be bigger kickers on like being able to get people adopting and actually measuring that adoption and then driving better incentive around cross-sell and being high usage customers. And that's where higher bonus incentives and structures come in.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel like I've had an evolving point of view on, right, is how we comp solutions engineers and solutions consultants. Because, you know, I've talked to so many people, including myself, some of my own impetus of PSC is like my account executive or the account executive my team partnered with made 4, 5, 6 times the amount of money.
Yep.
And so, you know, I think about if there are ways for solutions to make more money, it's carrying a bag, it's carrying a quota, it's having more accountability in these other places that we wouldn't traditionally give them as part of their role, but that's where the additional revenue comes from. And that's where I think the shift in roles and responsibilities ultimately plays out.
I probably would have said, I'm going way down this path, right, towards this like 50-50 type model, because most reps are 50-50 model.
Yeah, they are.
Most SE organizations are still 70-30, some 60-40. Vertical SaaS has given me like a whole new perspective. In a lot of cases, especially like what we're talking about for Procore, we try to find folks that have been working in construction on the job site.
I love that.
So they are not used to an incentive comp plan in a lot of cases. So a 70-30 plan all of a sudden is also just like a whoa, big shift. Now, you apply that to like anything in medical or in some financial cases where they're used to just a salary.
Yeah.
And this idea of a split incentive program, much less 60-40.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to swallow. But as I think people get more comfortable and more ingrained in this idea of what the role is and how much impact they can have, I think that they will want to opt for that in a lot of cases. And I love this idea of creating positions that generate more risk, but generate more reward.
Love it. Nailed it right there, right? Yeah. And this is what I love to see more in this next wave of SaaS is a little bit more risk taking, you know, creation of types of roles that, you know, are trying something. Because what I want to talk to you about is you kind of nailed it when it comes to change management within a big organization. I have been talking about things for the last couple of years through Presales Collective and now TestBox about shifts in go-to-market. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go back to tech is I wanted to put my money where my mouth was. I wanted to not pontificate at PSC about all these things. Yeah. I wanted to go like lead from the front and try to build these org structures. It's a lot easier for me to do this as we've built this company, rebuilt from the ground up. And if you look at Series C or A or B, it's a lot easier to make these shifts. It's a lot harder for you to make those types of shifts, right? So how do you think about making that type of seismic shift within a big organization? Because obviously you have to want to take on some risks. At the same time, you need to make sure it's going to work before you change the entire organization.
Yeah. Now, are you talking about make the comp plan types of shifts?
Any of these shifts, right? If it's role mergers, it's comp plans, it's any of these big shifts that we're talking about that we're seeing across the micro. Like, how are you going to do that at a big company like yours?
Yeah. So some ways are a little bit easier because when your company goes through a big shift, that's like a way that you can hop on board, right? So if you scale in like smaller companies to larger companies, then you typically go to from these big global models into a couple of different areas, right? You go into like regional based models or vertical based structures or GM based structures. And if you're going to make these big types of shifts, that's where you can actually do new role creation, new comp plan creation.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and like sometimes this is not the greatest thing, but in role consolidation, right? So when you are consolidating, if you are a big company and you have gone through some tough times, some of these consolidations can also be potential great opportunities for folks where they have been doing a ton. Maybe they haven't been recognized in the way that they thought.
Yeah, for sure.
You can create roles in that situation that actually encourage more risk and more reward.
Yeah.
Sometimes you didn't realize how hard it was until you actually carried the bag.
Yeah.
One of the things that we actually did in our last SE Summit, we had a global summit, it was a global hybrid, so we had groups together in different countries and different parts of the world. But we had almost an internal career fair, and it was this idea of people that had left the company, gone into sales, like in other elements, gone into product, and we asked them to come back and be like, tell us how it was.
Really?
Yeah, and it was great.
What were some of the learnings from that?
Well, some folks that had left the company, they're like, hey, Pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good over there. Like, there's some special elements that are going on, and there's some cool things like when you leave the nest as well. There were some other ones about going to sales, and we've been really fortunate. People that have left and gone to sales have done really well.
That's awesome.
So they are great people to emulate.
Yeah.
But they also gave us some things of, by the way, it is so much harder than you think. And the end of month, end of quarter pressures
It's unbelievable.
are real. And then going over to product, and also just showing that is a career path.
Right. That's important.
So many different elements that can help. And so I thought that was a really cool way to show, hey, there are all types of ways that you can go in your career.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a bad choice. And I just wanted everyone to know you can stay here. It's fine. Like, we have a home and a path where you're here as well.
Yeah.
And so as we go into that, like I said, big growth opportunities, consolidation opportunities, those are the elements that create the opportunity to create that type of change.
Yeah.
The only other element that I would say is, like, if you can, and if you're in a position to, depending on your budget and the way you allocate funds, try to create areas where you can experiment, where you've created opportunity to try new things. So we didn't have this idea of like a tools or a productivity team or demo engineering, and kind of just created it one time and just used some of the headcount to do that. And the dream wasn't realized for a little while. And now we're looking at what used to take us days to create environments. It can take us now minutes or hours.
Amazing.
So like those things you have to take a chance on too, to kind of create those new opportunities.
Yeah. So much goodness in that, right? I want to talk about two different things. The first one is risk, right? A lot of times in solutions, folks are not always wanting to take on the risk, right? So what kind of advice can you give people watching and listening to this to think about risk in their business? Like, how should they approach risk on if that's not their general DNA?
It's tough. It's like, I almost think, what's the risk factor in your life right now? That typically translates to your work.
Yeah.
Right. And so when people are staring down the barrel of a couple different opportunities, I think one of the big things to be real about yourself with is like, what is your level of risk that's acceptable right now?
Right.
And how much do you think that you can go out and capture that? And if you believe and you want to bet all on yourself, and not to say that if you don't, you're not saying that, right, that's bad or you're bad, but take that on, because especially depending on where you are in your career, a lot of people have the flexibility to do that. If you don't, just be real with yourself.
Yeah,
and it's not to mean that you're going to take a back seat or you're slowing down in your career, but just be honest about what the risk is like for you, what that means potentially you, your family, if you have kids, significant others. Like, everyone's in a different spot. Some people are caregivers. So like, I never judge anyone based on that, because I don't know what's going on inside of their lives.
Yeah. It's a great call out.
But if they're capable and they want to, I encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more of the, I think it's, you're listening for a couple different things. If it's, I'm not sure it's the right time in my life, like, I got that signal. But if it's, I'm not sure I'm capable of doing it, that's just, I'm a little scared and I need a little bit of a shove.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
You need a little shove. And I would say, I love that response. And that when people ask me if I was crazy to leave Salesforce to start a Slack channel, I think about what's the worst thing could have happened. I could have built my network. I could have made friends. I could have met people. And, maybe I didn't make as much money, but I would have, potentially got a better job coming out of that. Right. And that was a big personal risk. Right. And if I think about company risk, I've reshifted TestBox a couple of times, and it's like, what is the downside that happens here? Evaluating that downside and that risk and knowing like where you can turn the dials is an important part of actioning risk.
I think what you just said actually highlights a couple of things. One of which is like, people will in some way, shape or form always emulate their leader. And if they see someone like you, right, who's leading go-to-market, taking risks, they're going to feel like it's okay to take risks. There was a very like kind of silly story, in my opinion, but it was one of just like personal risk taking. I was doing an interview like this, where I was sitting on that seat and I was doing an interview with an executive. And I remember at one point, nervous, and I was trying to make sure I asked the right questions, and iPad sitting here, and I went like this because I was nervous. And all of a sudden, like, the chat started lighting up, and I was like, oh God, I don't know what I said. Like, what did I do? It was the shoes that I was wearing. And it had nothing to do with what I said. And so, like, in my mind, I had taken this risk, but what people were commenting on were the shoes. And the funny byproduct was, is that they're like, I can't believe that you wore sneakers to interview an executive.
So cool.
And I was like, okay, if that allows you to do anything more with like bringing yourself, then like amazing.
Yeah. I love that story. That's awesome. And you are so fashionable with the sneakers. I mean, it's a conversation starter, nonetheless, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna get a little self-conscious. I think if people like, if that is the only offer, the only thing that I bring to the table is good shoes, then I'm in trouble.
That's definitely not the truth. So I want to close, Josh, talking about risk taking and you and risk taking, right? Again, I've really appreciated getting to know you the last couple of years and appreciate all that you've done for me and in my career and helping guide me in the right direction. One of the things that I'm very curious about is if you would ever move to a sales role or take on sales functionality, because I've had a couple of guests on this interview series that were former solutions leaders that have now either owned a number or taken on sales or taken on other parts of the business. And not to say that you're not just an incredible SE leader, but I could definitely see you in that role. So have you thought about that? Like, how do you think about risk in taking that type of role?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm probably more risk averse at home than I am at work. Ask me to choose from 3 things on a menu, and we'd still be sitting here 45 minutes into the conversation. I wouldn't know. But at work, I think that I have much more of me, or much more risk in me. And so I've always thought of myself as a business leader and not a solutions leader necessarily or anything. I just want to do what is best for the business.
Yeah.
I would take on that role. I would take on almost a role that the business really thought that they could see me leading well.
Yeah.
So sales, yeah. Product, sure. Go to market, yeah. Like,
love it.
I just get excited about that idea of thinking through, like, how do we make this group like even better than what it is now, or how do we change, or how do we shift, or how do we consolidate, whatever it might be. Like, I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah.
That's what kind of gets my blood going. Like, you can like just see, get excited talking about it. But
I can totally see it.
I'm ready. I'm up for it. But at the same time, God, do we have the greatest job in the world?
Totally.
So I go in with like, sure. But at the same time, being an SE leader, I think, is one of the best jobs.
I can agree.
You get such a purview in this beautiful nexus between product and enablement and marketing and sales, and sometimes you don't even realize all the impact and influence that you have.
100%.
And so, like I said, depending on your risk level, I think people should go for it. But at the same time, you should always consider yourself having a happy home and solutions.
I love it. Yeah, happy home and solutions. It's the best job no one's ever heard of. I think more people know about it now, which is great.
Yep.
One thing I want to highlight, though, is I think for you, having that mentality is the most important aspect. But as a solutions professional, a business professional, like you said, you've got exposure to so many different places in the business that you could be like, you know what, I can go there and I'm going to bring a solutions, problem-solving mindset, a certain mentality of solving problems and getting things done. And I think that's why you'd be wildly successful wherever you ended up.
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Yeah.
Hard to accept a compliment, but I'm learning just to say thank you and go on my way.
Absolutely. Josh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, man. And I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the way you conduct yourself, and you're continuing to push the solutions profession forward. It's inspiring.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. If there's anything else that I can be of service of, like a good SE, just let me know.
I love it. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, man.